Good evening, everyone. I am Toby the Kilted Adventurer. I have a friend here, Kirk. We are going to be doing a mindset series on Tuesday nights. I will do 30 minutes on my channel, and then we will flip over and do 30 minutes on Kirk's channel, which is Moose Ministries. Got a little technical issue going on there. Everything is muted. We're good to go. So, Kirk, what we're going to discuss tonight on my channel and then a continuation on Moose Ministries is trusting your gut. Before we jump into that, however, do you mind giving the viewers who are watching them now or on the live stream replay later a brief overview of Moose Ministries?
Moose Ministries is an organization that was created. It is a 501c3. And its purpose is to train and equip people in the gospel. So our main mission statement is to empower, equip, and to liberate. So we believe that by empowering people through the gospel, equipping people through the gospel, we empower them. And then through that empowerment, they find liberty. And as you minister to their spiritual needs, they also find extended liberty in Christ himself. And we also have other outreaches that we do as well, where we reach out to people around the world, locally and abroad. Our desire is to help people in their current condition as we're reaching them with the gospel.
Thank you for that. Appreciate the overview, Kirk, and we will talk about more about that later on tonight. I had a situation a couple of weeks ago. And what I want to do is kind of break that down as it relates to trusting my gut. Shakespeare said in one of his plays, and I'm not an expert in English literature, but I remember this phrase very well. He said, "Above all else, to thine own self be true." I made a conscious choice to not follow my instincts. And 3 days later, the situation went sideways on me. Did not turn out well. Had to make amends. Had to make rectification of the situation. What do you think? Should I have trusted my instinct? Or in this situation, even though it went poorly, is that always the best idea?
Sometimes our instincts can get the better of us, but I think a lot of times it can also guide us. I think sometimes we have to weigh out the situation and really kind of discern what is the best answer for the moment. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I want to acknowledge Jamie from Lower Michigan Hiking and Camping Adventures. Thank you for joining us in this conversation tonight, Jamie. I will be doing a live stream until 7:30, and then switching over to Moose Ministry 7:35 and finishing the conversation there. Tonight we are talking about trusting your gut. And there's several words that come to mind when I started thinking about this topic to prepare for this conversation tonight. Words like intuition or wisdom or instinct. So I think breaking those words down will help us grasp this concept a little bit better on when it is more appropriate to trust your gut or when to perhaps seek counsel or make other decisions. So first of all, intuition. I view intuition as a combination of life experience. You touch the hot stove, it burns your hand. Your intuition might be to approach the stove with caution in the future. What do you think about intuition from your perspective or any examples from your life?
Well, I think sometimes intuition can be a way to guide us, especially when you're talking about it. Really, to me, when I hear the word intuition, I'm really thinking about you're listening to your gut, right?
Yeah.
So I think sometimes when you're speaking from that perspective, intuition can sometimes lead you in a way to where your intellect cannot. You may not have knowledge about a situation, but as you are navigating through that, you can listen to your gut or to your intuition to try to guide and direct you. Now, different people have different philosophies as to what the intuition is. I know there's some medical studies that talk about how our brain and our intestines during development are actually linked together and come from the same structure and separate at birth. During not at birth, but during the formation in the womb. So with that in mind, and I am not a medical expert at all, so let's put that out there up front. But I do like to read. I love to listen to research. And some of the research that I've read talks about how there's actually something connected in the gut that it's not necessarily, we don't understand it yet, but it somehow guides us and directs us. And there's some scientists out there that wonder if it's because of that connection from where the brain and the intestines came from that same matter in the very beginning. And so sometimes maybe, possibly, maybe there's a way that it even connects to something that's not even in the realm that you and I are in. And it can access things that you and I can't even see to kind of grab that guidance from, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. I think about newborn babies do not have to be taught to hold their breath underwater. And I don't know if that's intuition or instinct, but we certainly are, hardwired from whether you believe in creation, whether you believe in pure evolution, or a combination of both, which I tend to gravitate toward that. We're created, but then we, have learned things as a species and made some modifications over time. That's my personal belief, but we have a wide variety of people on my channel. But there are things that we are born already knowing. And then there's things that are learned behaviors as well. So I think.
Can I interject something real quick on that one?
Yes.
Yeah. What's interesting is because you're talking about learned behaviors versus, things that are born into us. I think of some of my kids. There's certain characteristics that my oldest son has that he never saw from his mother's father, his grandfather, or maternal grandfather. Well, these things he exhibited way before he was ever exposed to his grandfather. So the interesting thing is these are not necessarily, genetic things, but they're characteristics. The way he would walk, the way he would hold himself, certain mannerisms that he would even do, almost imitated his grandfather to the letter. However, he had never seen his grandfather. He did not know his grandfather until much later on in life. So how did he understand how to walk or talk or hold himself a certain way? You know what I mean?
I do.
It was uncanny, the fact that he picked up on certain things that only his grandfather and his mother and his grandmother would know, or someone that was very close to his grandfather. And I didn't even realize it, even though I'd been around his grandfather several times. My wife watched him one day and goes, he's walking just like my dad. He's doing this just like my father, but he's almost not seen him ever in his life. He's only been exposed to him like twice. And that's not even, in a cognitive state. He was a baby at that point. So how did that happen? So it makes you wonder, is there maybe even imprints, genetically from characteristics, or is it something greater? Is it something even different than that?
You mentioned multiple children, and I think about nature versus nurture. You have multiple children, I do as well, raised in the same house, in the same environment, taught the same values, yet very different in many ways. And I love that we are so unique, but that's not all nurture, or else we would have 3 carbon copies or 2 carbon copies or 4 carbon copies, whatever the case may be. And that's just not what happened. So I love that it's probably a great combination of both.
Absolutely. I'm glad my kids are not exactly like me. That's for sure.
Me too. Me too. Me too. Um, let's get a little deeper for a minute then as it relates to trusting your gut. And we'll take it one more level. What about emotion? So, what role does emotion have in decision making? I've got some opinions about that. I'll actually share some information I just heard this week. It was from a podcast that I listened to, and the podcast person is more in the behavioral mental health space, but he was interviewing one of the most prominent, trusted, successful attorneys in the world, and they were talking about the emotional response and putting some gap between yourself and what you're going to say. Um, have you ever had a situation where your emotional response is something that maybe you, on hindsight, would have responded to later, or maybe gave yourself time to walk around the block before you responded? And in my case, I had a situation this week where I gave myself a few hours before responding. Um, don't always do that well, but emotions, I think, do play a role in decision making. Just I'm not sure how much of a role and how soon.
Toby, there's been many, 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 many times at work where that has happened. And we have a little rule where I work, and that is if you have an email that you have a question about whether you should send that email, write the email. Don't put the sender at all in the email. Let it sit for 10 or 15 minutes. Come back and reread it. And then if you're unsure, let someone else read it before you send it.
Mm.
And a lot of times what happens if you just give yourself that 15 minutes in between, when you go back and read it, many times you'll end up deleting it or completely rewriting it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times in the heat of the moment, your emotion will dictate things that your logic or your understanding will say, no, this is not appropriate. This might be taken a different way, than what really is the true intent. So sometimes in the emotional moment, we may be thinking, I'm making my point. I'm really going to drive it home so that they understand what's really right here. But when we go back and reread it after we've kind of calmed down a little bit, we'll realize that, okay, I added a lot of extra emphasis on certain points that really brought up the level or the escalation more than I needed it to.
Yeah.
And so I think many times we really got to tone that thing back a little bit, reread it after we've had a season to calm down. And, Toby, there's times where 1 to 2 hours may not be enough.
Okay.
Especially when it's someone that you love, someone that you know very deeply. You may need to have a cool down time, and you will only be the one that can judge if you've had enough time during that relationship type of disagreement.
Mm-hmm. No, I don't think removing all emotion from decision making is either appropriate. And I'll give you a couple of emotions that come to mind. The first one is empathy. So, in a situation where somebody is either frustrated or has had a challenge, maybe either learning a concept, or maybe they've had an experience with a customer or with a leader that's that has affected them, I think we should be empathetic in our communications, whether by email or in person or by phone. Another emotion, you think about, of course, we're talking about, anger or zingers or I'm going to get you, but it's really, I guess, compassion, really trying to embrace the situation that other person is in. So I think empathy, compassion, some of those emotions do have a role in decision making on how we approach situations, things we say, and maybe more important, things we don't say, and then how we approach that. So, Kirk, do you have any devices that are currently unmuted? I'm hearing a little bit of a feedback. And while he's checking that, if you are watching this either live or on the replay, please remember to go and hit that chat button. You have to leave or hit the like button. You have to leave the chat box to do that. Do that and come right back in. We do welcome any comments or questions in the chat, and we'll certainly address that in the time we have. Please leave comments below if you're watching later. Let me know you were able to catch this on replay. So we've talked about intuition, instinct, emotion. We did talk some about learned behavior. What about wisdom? I think that's a culmination of a lot of these different things. What, in your estimation, is the definition of wisdom? And then I would like to park here for a few minutes.
Well, for me, wisdom, I think, always has to start out with the fear of God. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're looking at it from an intellectual standpoint or biblical standpoint. Being a leader in the church, it is very difficult for me to separate the two. Number one, because of my faith, because I am a leader in the church. But at the same time, if we stop the concern of God, if we don't have the concern of Him, and we completely disregard that, then the decisions we make will have very little empathy, very little emotion, very little concern for others. If you think about it, then we risk the chance of going into things like euthanization and completely making decisions almost like, and I hate to make a Marvel movie reference, but Thanos said, this is the only way. We have to eliminate half of the population of the galaxy. This is the only way. I'm the only one that can see it. Well, he came to a non-emotional, fear of no one decision, to where in his eyes, this was the way it had to be and no other way. And I think when we completely remove God from the equation, we get into that realm to where we can start trying to play God ourselves and not allow a greater power to dictate and to guide us in the way we need to go. Now, if we're just looking from purely intellectual at the same time, I think that we need to look at the different pieces of the scenario. Now, and that there's a piece of the question that I may have missed, because I do think I'm having some audio issues on my end. So I do apologize, but from a purely intellectual side of things, we need to look at all sides of the matter when it comes to wisdom. Let's just say, for example, if someone's having an issue with their boss and another coworker, are they looking at it just from their point of view? Are they considering their boss's point of view? And are they considering their coworker's point of view? When we come into an argument of any kind, we need to look at it from more angles than only our own. Mm-hmm. If we don't, then we're not really taking a wise approach to it. It's all about self. It's all about what gratifies me or takes care of what I feel. But that's not wisdom, right? Wisdom means that we're considering all the options, all the consequences, all of the scenarios that could play out, and we're making a decision based on what's best for all parties involved, not just ourselves.
So you're really talking about a self-sacrificing, or at least a putting yourself last or second after others type of wisdom. So that's kind of taking it to the whole new level.
Yeah, like I said, I might have missed part of the question, because there is about every third word I'm missing.
Well, we'll get that straight for this series. We got several more conversations to go, and live is live, so you got to take the good with the bad. Maybe we'll use a headset or something for the 7:35 over at Moose Ministries. If you can catch that, please do. We are talking about trusting your gut today, and we've discussed a number of things relating to what it is, when you should, intuition, instinct, emotion, certainly learned behavior. And we're now talking about wisdom. I've heard a very simplified definition, and I don't think it's adequate, but it's a good starting spot. Wisdom is when experience and knowledge meet. It's the difference. And again, I think that's a very rudimentary starting spot. You can have knowledge of something academically and have never done it before. I don't think you would want to trust a practitioner, say, of medicine who's never had any practical experience in a clinic or a hospital. That's why they make them go through residency and internships and all of those types of things. The same thing with somebody who has experience only, but they don't know what they're doing. So you can learn some things from experience, but you can't, for instance, take apart a rocket ship and put it back together and get it right. I would never want to fly on that. So I think it's got to be a combination of both items. Wisdom is experience, it is intellect, but it's also the third thing, and you referenced this. I believe it's something that you have to ask God for. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of all wisdom. So, having a Christian faith and being of that biblical belief, I believe that is something that God said He will give all those who ask for it, and He'll give it to us abundantly.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the very place that it begins, is that we have to ask.
So, starting out with the experience that I alluded to at the beginning, there was something I knew to do that was right, and I chose not to do it. And that had consequences. What about situations where you know something is wrong, but you do it anyway? Do we have time to go there?
Looking at the time, I'm not sure that we have enough time to have a full discussion on that. I mean, we can kind of dance around the top of that pinhead, but that could be quite a deep conversation in itself. And I definitely think I would want to have a headset on so I can make sure I'm hearing everything that you're saying.
Yes. Well, as it relates to not trusting your gut is the main topic I want to discuss now. And what about when you know something's wrong and you do it anyway?
I think the question was, if we know it's wrong and we do it anyway, what's the consequences?
Yeah. I mean, that's the opposite of trusting your gut. But it's always trusting your gut lead you to the right decision, I guess. That's kind of the angle I'm taking, because there is truth.
Okay. I got you. So if we're trying to trust our gut and we make the wrong decision, how does that look, right?
That's right. Or could trusting our gut lead us to what we know is the wrong decision anyway?
I guess here's where I would play and I hate to say devil's advocate, or maybe the lawyer's advocate, however you want to put it. But did you really trust your gut, or did you trust your desire?
Oh.
Because many times what I've found is, in my personal life, when I've made decisions that was not necessarily where God would want me to go, and I knew it was wrong, God was already whispering to me in my gut. I already had a feeling in the gut of my stomach areas, like, oh no, that you shouldn't do this thing. But my desires drove me another way. And so I didn't necessarily not trust my gut. Well, I guess in a way I didn't, because I went against my gut, right? But I chased my desire. And a lot of times they're wrestling within. Both the inner voice, so to speak, or that sense inside of your gut, but also our desire, all are within the cavity of our chest and our gut area most of the time. And sometimes it's almost at war with each other.
Yeah.
So on one hand, you're like, well, I really want to do this. On the other hand, you're like, I'm not sure that I should. Well, if you listen to I'm not sure if I should, maybe you never would have made the wrong decision in the first place. But many times I think we get into justification.
Yeah.
Well, I really want to do this, and I'm wrestling with. It must be okay. I'm gonna chase this thing.
And after you do it, let's justify why intellectually.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that's you're right. That's a very deep conversation. This is the first of a series of live streams that we will do. They're focused on the mindset, so kind of a motivation and mindset series. We'll be doing them at 7 p.m. Eastern time on this channel. Hello, M&T Living and Cooking. Thank you for joining. We are actually wrapping up today, so I would love it if you could come and watch this back on the playback when we conclude in a few minutes. We are finishing this conversation, however, if you would like to continue to support at Moose Ministries, you can see that on here. We'll be finishing that at 7:35, so we'll wrap this up in about 3 minutes. And then we'll take a 5-minute break and be over on his channel as well to finish up this conversation. We'll be doing this for the next few weeks. M&T Living and Cooking, they cook some really delicious meals and makes my mouth water. So I always enjoy their live streams as well. So to wrap this up, we were talking about trusting your gut. We went through a number of different aspects of that. Where we ended was when you are not trusting your gut, but whether you're trusting your desires. So the conscious, the inner voice. That's where we're going to pick this up on your channel. And we're going to talk about how to hear that still small voice. Or I believe you've titled it, How to Hear the Voice of the Holy Spirit. So that's where we're going to pick this up over at Moose Ministries, 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time. Remember, everyone watching this later and now, to hit the like button. Appreciate you joining, and we will see you all in a few moments.